Hello, and thanks for joining us. This is the very first episode of Tech Policy Grind, the Internet Law and Policy Foundry's brand new podcast, a show where we hammer out the latest in tech law and policy. Each episode will be joined by fellows and friends of the Internet Law and Policy Foundry to talk about the fascinating, important, and occasionally terrifying work that they do and the journey they had to get where they are. Today, we'll be talking about the most important law on the internet with some of the preeminent folks here at the Foundry, inaugural fellow Ali Sternburg and founder Tim Lordan. My name is Emery Rohn. I'm a 2017 fellow with the Foundry, a recent graduate of law school, a frequent co-host of that other legal tech podcast, This Week in Law on the Twit Network, and generally thrilled to be in such great company. Joining us for our discussion today are a cadre of very impressive attorneys doing very impressive things. Joe Jerome, Policy Counsel for the Privacy and Data Project at the Center for Democracy and Technology, and Panal Shah, a California attorney who recently left the ranks of the Obama administration. Do you guys want to introduce yourselves? Joe?
Certainly. Thanks, Emery. I'm super excited to be here. As Emery said, I work on privacy and data. And what does that mean? It means big data, AI, IoT, GDPR. I sort of think that I work in the land of tech and privacy law buzzwords. So I have been the creator of multiple failed podcasts, both personal and professional. So, hey, fourth time's a charm. I'm latching on to this effort with the Foundry to sort of spread my pathological fear of Skynet and sort of avoid being drowned by limited edition video game steelbooks.
There are worse things. Panal, what's up?
Hello, podcast world. I'm Panal Shah, an attorney based in the California Bay Area. I'm a graduate of Howard University School of Law. Gotta shout out my institution. I currently consult for the government on bridging the GovTech gap on how the federal sector can tap into innovative startups to bring technology solutions to solve tough government problems. I've got a general love for First and Fourth Amendment questions, social justice, and increasing diversity in tech.
Awesome. Very impressive people, and there will be plenty of time for our backstories. We might even do an episode interviewing each of us sometime in the future. But today we want to talk about the Internet Law and Policy Foundry itself. And to do that, we brought on some of the best people to tell that story, Ali and Tim. Ali is a senior policy counsel at the Computer and Communications Industry Association, or CCIA for our acronym-friendly DC listeners, and one of the most prominent first fellows at the Foundry. Tim Lordan is the executive director of the Internet Education Foundation and a powerful presence provocateur of the Foundry behind the scenes. Tim, Ali, thank you so much for joining us.
So, all right, let's get going. First and most important question, what is this whole Internet Law and Policy Foundry? Why are we all here?
Well, the Internet Law and Policy Foundry was created as a place where early career professionals who were first and foremost passionate about technology could achieve some professional development, showcase their talents, and generally network among their peers. There really wasn't a place for folks. There's no bar association that kind of catered to that audience. And frankly, the idea that people would come to policy and come to law because they're passionate about the technology was something that my contemporaries saw as really new and exciting. And we really wanted to kind of capture that. So the Foundry is probably the best and brightest. I think there are over 50 fellows now of people in internet law and internet policy, and they're all rock stars as far as I'm concerned.
How long ago did the Foundry get started? This is the third year, right, or the second year?
It's essentially, we're in probably about the third year. We had some soft launches, and there was a lot of drawing board work. It took me and a fellow named Michael Kumbianda, who's also a fellow, and Ali, several months, probably half a year to kind of get the thing up and running. So it's about 3 years in. We have two different classes of fellows. One the inaugural class of fellows, which Ali is a member. We'll kind of start transitioning out, and in the 2017 fellows, of which Emery and Joe are, we'll kind of take over.
So I feel like, isn't Ali something of a literal and figurative rock star?
Indeed she is.
Hi guys, I'm really happy to be part of the Foundry in general and this podcast specifically. I love podcasts, and I love, the Foundry is really important to me. But just to get to the rockstar thing real quick, yes, I sing, I write songs, and I love to try to be a literal rock star in my free time. But for the tech policy rock star stuff, I got involved with the Foundry pretty early on. I love the idea that Tim and Michael had. I had been running this like 100-page public Google Doc of internet and technology jobs and internships and other opportunities, because I like to mentor. So I just out at my law school too. I went to WCL, American University's law school here in DC, and I often will meet with current WCL students, recent grads, people from all over, and I would realize that there were so many great jobs that I wanted to try to give to all these great people I'd met with, and I didn't really have a central repository. I would put them on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and I would try to keep in touch with people I'd met with, but I finally was like, okay, I need something else. So I started this Google Doc. I eventually bought the domains of iptechjobs.com and allyslist.org, and I started putting things in there and letting people contribute to it. And yeah, it kind of got out of hand in a good way. They were just showing how many different types of internet and technology and intellectual property, privacy, telecom, all different kinds of jobs and opportunities there are. And people would tell me that they got jobs through it, which was always so exciting. But so Tim kind of found me through that, and now this job board that we're talking about is the Internet Law and Policy Foundry job board, and it continues to be a great resource for people. And I'm so happy that it's been such a successful venture and that people still continue to get great jobs and internships from it. So definitely check it out if you haven't.
You should check it out yourself by going to our website, and you should check it out by staying tuned to the end of the episode if you want to hear about some very cool positions that are hiring right now for folks that are in this type of area.
So can I ask you a question? Because I loved your job list, and I thought it was incredible, and I can only imagine how much work that was back in the day. When did you start doing that? I mean, was this, I guess this is the segue to a question about how you got into tech law, but that was a tremendous amount of things. It's a huge volunteer effort to put on your shoulders. Was this in law school? Was this after law school when you just started, seeing what was out there?
I actually happen to know because I just got the who is reminder that I need to re-register it. So I bought the domain 3 years ago, like next week. And I think it was a public Google Doc for probably about a year before that. So I'd say maybe just to estimate that I started doing it maybe a year out of law school. I graduated law school in 2012. And I always took advantage of great mentors while I was in school, both like my awesome professors and 2Ls, 3Ls, recent grads, and so I definitely knew I wanted to pay it forward, especially as someone who was working in tech policy right out of law school. I wanted to try to help hire WCL students as interns, and which I do all the time. And so yeah, I knew right away that I wanted to encourage these passionate, up-and-coming tech policy rock stars and help them try to find a way to break into the field, and just to show them that there are a lot of opportunities. Sometimes people say, oh, it's really hard to work in this field. You have to go to a law firm, or you can't do what you're passionate about. But this has kind of shown me that there are so many people early in their career that are doing what they love. And so I'm really happy that I can play some small role in helping people get these really cool opportunities.
Yeah, one of my mentors when I was still in law school, who happens to also be a Foundry member, she will go unnamed right now, but she pulled me aside one day when we were talking career stuff, and she said, Emery, you should know the tech law field is psychotically competitive, and you really need to, lean on those mentorships, and you really need to make the effort to connect to other people in the area and connect to other people in your field. And so, for me, that's part of why I was so interested in the Foundry in the first place. Is it's such a great way of connecting to other professionals that are in this sort of niche, but rather competitive, very competitive field of, high tech, complicated legal issues.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that the Foundry has become a great platform for people creating our own opportunities to host events, to put on panels, to submit to speak at different conferences, which is something that we'll probably talk about later, some other cool upcoming events involving Foundry fellows. Because the reason that the Foundry has been such a great resource is that we don't have to wait for someone from the top to put out opportunities for us. We can kind of make our own opportunities and create podcasts, write blog posts, put on these events, and help promote each other. One of my other favorite podcasts is called Call Your Girlfriend, and the two hosts have this really cool theory called Shine Theory, and it's basically I don't shine if you don't shine. It's about, and it basically says like surround yourself with awesome people, promote them, it helps you. It just, yeah, it's all about like, I mean, I think that's sort of geared toward promoting awesome women, but just people in general try to pay it forward and create an awesome network of up-and-coming tech policy rock stars in this case.
And I should also say, in the application process for becoming a Foundry Fellow, one of the main requirements is that the applicant needs to have a demonstrable passion for technology. And that was one of the main things that the common denominator for all Foundry Fellows is that they have to be passionate about the tech and come to law and or policy because of that. And frankly, what you guys, I'm not an early career professional. I'm actually an older career professional. And when I started working in telecom tech policy, as it was described in the mid 1990s, people really were doing internet policy and they really weren't passionate about it. In fact, most of them were technophobic. Internet policy was something that, if you were in a company or a group and you got the short end of the stick, you'd have to go do internet policy because it was a backwater. Nobody cared about it. And because of that, the people that I was working with really just didn't enjoy technology. They were wary of it, and they were deeply concerned about it. I think that yielded some really terrible policy results. And now I think the great news is that you have this cadre of young professionals who are coming to law and policy because of technology and want to work in this field.
Tim, do you want to talk a little bit about the Internet Education Foundation? I think that's probably a good segue to the other sort of the parent foundation above the Foundry.
Yeah, in internet time, the Internet Education Foundation is really kind of ancient. It's over 20 years old. And it was created specifically to be a holding nonprofit for projects. It really doesn't, its name doesn't evoke any branding that you know of, but the projects kind of come and go, and we're designed to kind of incubate projects and then maybe send them on their way, one of which is the Foundry. The other projects that were created under the umbrella were the Congressional Internet Caucus. That's one of our projects. State of the Net Conference. That's one of our projects. And just recently, in the past 5 years, we created the Congressional App Challenge, which you may not have heard of, but it's happening in over 217 congressional districts all around the country, where members of Congress host coding challenges for their students in their district to win the Congressional Medal of Coding. So we're trying to inspire kids to code and pursue STEM careers. So it's really this really small nonprofit that's designed to kind of foster an appreciation for the internet as the most powerful medium for commerce, communications, and democracy ever created.
So I have a follow-up. So I'm curious what everybody's thoughts are. So whenever I think about tech law and policy, I think it sort of has two main centers of power, and that's probably Washington, D.C. and Silicon Valley. So one of the things I think has been really interesting from speaking to fellows is that there's been like a coordinated effort to try and make sure that you guys considered applications from people who weren't just in these two hubs. And I guess I'm just wondering if we all have, or any, Ali or Tim, if you guys have thoughts on how you sort of make awareness of tech law or making sure people are interested in technology in ways that aren't just in these two cities.
So I would say a few things. First of all, I would say that to echo what Tim said before, people are coming to internet and technology law on their own because they're passionate about it. They're not just kind of falling into it. Sometimes it's avoidable when you hear about things in the news that deal with privacy or cybersecurity, with net neutrality, with Section 230 now, or often copyright cases in the news that involve the internet. But yeah, one thing I would say is that people, no matter where they go to law school, they're going to be hearing about these cases in the news and in their classes, hopefully. So I would say another way to promote the Foundry outside of just DC and Silicon Valley would be to kind of reach out to law schools. We're not just, the Foundry is not just for law students and lawyers, but they are like an important part of our fellows and members. And so we've been trying to reach out to recruit from law schools all over, especially as there are so many great law professors and legal experts that are at lots of institutions. Because while there might be a lot of law schools in DC and the Bay Area, there's law schools all over, and people are taking intellectual property classes, they're taking internet and cyber law classes, all of these different areas. So we definitely have made a concerted effort to reach out to people, no matter where they're living across the country, and no matter where they want to work.
And it's expensive to live in San Francisco or DC. It's tough, that is a huge bar.
And New York and all of the super ridiculous places where all the startups are located.
Yeah, the problem is that might be where a lot of the jobs are, but I do think that there are startups all across the country that can, and small businesses that can rely on these internet services to be based anywhere. They can, use different social media as tools. They can start a business with eBay, Amazon, just Etsy, all these different kinds of internet platforms that allow people to live all over and ship to products and services to people across the U.S. and export abroad too.
And Joe,
mailing lawyers and coders and technologists and other policy experts. I don't know.
Joe, your question also goes to the question about we wanted to make it geographically diverse instead of just Washington, D.C. And I think that goes to the fact that we took pains to make sure that the Foundry from the get-go was as diverse as we could make it. As Ali said, we didn't want to limit it to just lawyers. We wanted to allow other people with different types of degrees to be part of the Foundry. We reached out to progressives, we reached out to conservatives, we reached out to libertarians. We tried to factor in different issue disciplines that people were specializing in. We really tried to make the Foundry as diverse on as many different levels as we could. And I think that's really what one of the things I'm most proud of.
Ali, you're right now Senior Policy Counsel at the Computer and Communications Industry Association. We were talking about just a little bit earlier about the ability of the internet to connect these small businesses and enable small businesses to ship international across the country. Do you want to go into a little bit of background about what the CCIA is?
So I can say a little bit about CCIA. CCIA is another organization that's been around for a bit. We were actually founded in 1972, so we've been around for more than 40 years, and we're a nonprofit.
There were computers in 1972?
It's true. So we represent. We're a nonprofit trade association that represents about 25 different internet and technology member companies, and our mission we've always been really mission driven since the 70s, and CCI has been about always been focused on competition, open markets, open systems, open networks. And we work on a lot of different public policy and law areas for our member companies. I work a lot on copyright and intermediary liability, but I have great colleagues in the Foundry, actually. My colleague Bajan, who's an inaugural fellow, does our privacy and cybersecurity work. My new colleague Rachel is also an inaugural fellow, and she's just started doing our trade work. We do telecom, patent reform, competition, lots of different areas, and we also have an office in Brussels that does EU tech policy work.
I know that.
And I've been with CCIA. I started as an intern my second summer of law school, and I've just never left. So
wow,
it's been this is my whole career. But
Ali, you're living the dream.
Right.
I know. Yeah, created position for me to keep me.
Right. So I think the question is always what would be some career advice you'd offer people?
I mean, I can. Yeah.
Can we jump back a little first, though? I'd like to ask.
Both,
what about your specific position? I mean, I know that I'm sure a lot of our listeners may have a vague idea of what it means to be senior policy counsel, but I'm sure that plenty more have no idea what being a policy counsel entails. Could you maybe give just a description of what that job is for some of our listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. So, policy counsel work for me. Sorry. So what I do is I do a lot of legal filings. Basically, being a lawyer is often a lot of writing, whether you're a policy lawyer or a litigator, transactional lawyer. So for me, being a policy lawyer means that often we'll do amicus briefs. We're going to influence the government across all the branches, when it comes to the judiciary, we do amicus briefs. We filed in the Supreme Court, in appellate courts, occasionally in district courts. And then we'll also do a lot of regulatory filings with different agencies. For me, it's often the Copyright Office or the Patent and Trademark Office or the U.S. Trade Representative, NTIA at the Department of Commerce. We'll respond to different requests for comments, and then the other branch will be the Hill, and so sometimes it involves lobbying or submitting testimony for different hearings. Right now, right now I've been doing some Hill-related work around Section 230, which we might talk about later, of the Communications Decency Act. Policy counsel basically means that you work on different types of public policy and are often telling policymakers across the government what to do, or more often, what not to do.
I have a question. Well, it was actually a question for Tim with regard to the Internet Education Foundation. Your mission statement revolves around education, democracy, and policy relating to the Internet. And you mentioned you've been in this field for a while. So I'm just curious about what major evolutions have you seen since you started working in the field? And maybe this is a broad question, but, where do you think we're headed?
That's a broad question, and I'll try not to be long-winded. I was fortunate enough while I was in law school to meet a staffer for Congressman Ed Markey, who was my congressman at the time, and I was able to intern for the congressman and came down to Washington to work on the telecom subcommittee around 1994. Which was kind of the dawn of the World Wide Web was just kind of starting up a little bit. Businesses started using email a little bit more, and web pages were coming online. And so it was a really exciting time. And during that time in 1984, Congressman Markey was creating and writing what he wanted to be the Telecommunications Act of 1994. It didn't work out that way because they lost the House of Representatives, and it became the Telecom Act of 1996. And frankly, that piece of legislation was the biggest update to the communications policy structure in our country since 1934. It was a huge, monumental update, and it really only mentioned the internet in one place, essentially, which was in the Communications Decency Act portion, which was an amendment by Senator Exxon from Nebraska that would have applied content and decency standard to the entire World Wide Web, and it was pretty stunning. And during that time, I graduated from law school. I came down to Washington and worked for NTIA on some of the implementing aspects of the Telecom Act of '96. The Telecom Act is largely irrelevant today, except for largely Section 230 and a few other provisions. But basically, the internet has kind of swallowed the telecommunications infrastructure. The issues when I started working on internet issues in 1997 and 1996 were basically a few privacy issues, some broadband deployment issues, and copyright issues, because the Digital Millennium Copyright Act was coming along. It's really hard to imagine how limited the space was. There really wasn't anybody in Washington that actually worked on internet policy. CCIA was in town, and they were working on competition issues. But there really wasn't a lot of people that really cared that much about internet policy. And, I'm an older person, so comparatively, it's really stunning to see how many issues there are now and how vibrant the space is and how people care about the internet and its meaning in daily life. One of the issues that CCIA worked on back in the early 1990s was encryption. The Clinton administration put forward Clipper chip. These are backdoors for law enforcement to get access to encrypted systems. Then they had the key escrow proposal, and then they were saying you can't export this level of encryption. It's really amazing at the time. With no consumers, people in the public had no idea what encryption was, and they couldn't see it. Today, everybody has encryption on their iPhone or their Android phone. They understand what it is. It's really a shocking evolution in how important these issues have become to people's daily lives.
Yeah, Tim, I actually, I agree with you completely. I think tech policy obviously touches every single aspect of our lives. And I think more so now than ever. And I was actually just really curious, just because I want to know from somebody, from IEF and like this is such a prominent issue nowadays. Like, I'm really curious about this sort of age of misinformation, given people now get, more people get their news online than my newspaper. Like, just, really quickly, like, how do we address this issue of either inadvertent or purposeful spread of false information, since that was such a big kind of thing this year? How do we kind of attempt that balance between like more access to information than ever before and this use of internet to sort of propagate misinformation? How do we control that?
You can look at it in a couple of different ways, right? And we're learning more and more about the Russian advertising, the Russian fake news, election news type thing. We're learning more about that literally every day over the last 17 to 25 days that this has been going on, and since the election. That said, so I'm going to hold off judgment on the specifics. I would take a step back and say I'm an optimist when it comes to information. I really did feel like, I wanted to get into technology policy, meaning information technology policy, when I was working for Congressman Maki, because I just felt like it was such a democratizing, powerful medium that was coming down the pike, and I really thought that it would kind of give people a level set, and the powerful wouldn't rule. And I don't know if that has come to fruition. I do believe that more information is just better, and I think there are some tweaks that have to be done. But I'm generally an optimist about more information sources. I am not a journalistic elitist. I do not hearken for the halcyon days of when broadcast journalism and newspaper journalism was at its highest level. I don't pine for those days. I really don't. I think we have a tendency to glorify journalism, print, and broadcast. It probably wasn't as good as we kind of want to remember it was.
Hey, so Tim, I'd just like to quickly follow up, as someone who, used to love to be a fan of history, and as someone who's been here for a while. I almost wonder if this is worth its own show at some point. But I'm just curious if you have thoughts. So if you're interested in getting interested into tech law and policy, I mean, how do you go about finding the history of, I guess, the politics and the relationships behind the scenes? Because I think about sort of the insight you can occasionally get into some of the debates in the 90s if you read a book like Crypto, or you try and talk to folks, old timers at the Electronic Frontier Foundation. But it seems like what you're describing in the 90s, that's a completely different universe than what we have today, and just the evolution of that's fascinating to me.
No, trust me, there's a lot of old timers like me, and even older old timers than me, would love to sit around and just talk about the old days. I find like I do that too often. I've become that guy. But I do think that there is something that oftentimes we probably should revisit it a little bit more, because it's hard for people, early career professionals like you all, to really kind of have that historical context and understand how unique it is right now. And frankly, I think Emery was saying earlier, is that it's such or maybe Joe was saying that it's a small universe of people in tech, internet policy, and internet law. The way I look at it is it's incredibly huge compared to what it was, and it's growing exponentially. And I think, having those different perspectives are really important. That said, I don't plan on going out and creating a new foundry for older career professionals. I just don't have it in me. So
you could at least let it. I mean, I feel like it would be a public service to throw out some names and put together like a collection of things that people should read. That's more than just sort of the cases. But maybe that's a project for another day.
No, and who would be good for that job? I'll nominate him as Adam Thayer. Adam Thayer would be good at. He's with the Mercatus Center at George Mason University. He'd be good at doing that. And in fact, Adam was one of those kind of sparks that made me think that there was something new happening when it comes to people coming to internet law and internet policy because of their passion for technology. Adam basically was saying, I'm having coffee 3 times a week with young people asking me, how do I get into tech policy, or how do I get into tech law? And so he wrote this blog post that summarized every coffee he's ever had. Like, these are the 4 points I tell people, young people, when they want to get into internet policy. And he wrote a blog post and he said, "I'll still be happy to have coffee with you, but here's what I say to people at coffee." And I realized that he and I were both having a lot of coffees, and it was so exciting to see people like wanting to get into that space. But Adam reads a lot, and he would be a great author of these are the internet history books you need to read, or the white papers that you need to read.
Yeah, I mean, we are starting a Foundry book club, it's great to definitely read about all the fascinating history that came before us in the technology side, on the politics and policy side. But I do still think that having those kind of coffees, I love having them all the time. It's like no work for me to sit down and word vomit about myself, and if it's at all helpful. So I really recommend people sitting down one-on-one with people, or setting up phone calls depending on where you're based, because you can really learn a lot about career advice just from different people's trajectories. Sorry, Panal, I think you were about to say something.
No, I was just going to say, making that information, like, I love your colleague's idea, Tim, of kind of just posting it online and making it available, because for those of us, as we mentioned before, who aren't, although I am in the Bay Area and I lived in DC previously, for those people who are not in those major bubbles, you don't have those people coming through your town all the time. You don't have access to them. So I think it's really awesome and really helpful to be able to have access to resources like that when you can't just call up someone and have a coffee.
What I was wondering is if either of you had advice for law students, or maybe people that aren't quite law students yet that are interested in getting into tech law. What would you say to a young person that is maybe listening to this show, that is interested in all the stuff that we're talking about, but is sort of throwing their hands up? Maybe they don't live in DC or San Francisco, or maybe they do.
So I would reiterate what I just said about trying to talk to different people, hear their stories, learn about their different paths, and just tell as many people, both from what you'll learn from those conversations, and also just so you tell as many people as possible that you're looking for a job or internship, wherever stage of your career or education you might be in. Because the more people you tell, that they can tell their networks, and if someone hears about something and it gets to you, like, it really does matter what you know, but in a lot of times in this field, it matters who you know. So it just the as much as you can, try to play the game and network and meet different people. It really helps to just maximize the opportunities that you hear about, because you only need one job at a time, So it can really seem daunting, but I know so many great people in this field that have really are working in this field now, and I do think that people who are passionate about internet law and policy, about different areas of it, and put themselves out there, I really do think that people succeed.
And I think, this is Tim, and I think Allie's absolutely right. The networking aspect of it is crucial. I do believe that you want to go and do it. The most successful people I've seen have done this. Had internships where they expand their network of people. And I think one of the things about the Foundry was we wanted to be able to have early career professionals showcase their talent, whether it be through a podcast, whether it be through a Medium post, whether it be in other ways. Because frankly, at least in internet policy, and certainly in internet law, if you're working as an associate at some law firm and the partner doesn't really want to get you out and just wants you to be grinding away on briefs all day, no one's going to know who you are for 6 years or 8 years until you might become partner. Same thing largely in a congressional office or in a department or agency of the government. No one knows who you are. If you're like a legislative assistant or a legislative correspondent, it may take years for anyone to know who you are. And I think you need to kind of try to break free of that. And that's what we kind of created the Foundry to do, is have them network and allow them to showcase their talents when they're not exactly visible to people outside.
Yeah, I definitely agree. People should try to be, I always tell people to use the free tools on the internet. I mean, to go to events, to tweet from them, to share news, to follow people. A lot of people in this space are really active on Twitter when a new Supreme Court case opinion comes out. Everyone's live tweeting it. Everyone's talking about stuff. and just try to be part of the conversation and know who all the players are. And if you meet someone, follow up on LinkedIn, follow up by email, and just write blog posts on Medium. You just take advantage of all the different tools out there to share all the things that you have to say and to consume and learn about the news. And then, what Tim said, like, I think the Foundry is another great resource. So people, once we're recruiting again, I would really encourage people to get involved in this space, because we try to give a platform for people to do all of the above, to network and to meet great people and to create content and just participate in this field.
Awesome. So we've talked a little bit about CDA 230. Part of the show is to discuss the hottest and most important issues in legal tech and in the policy world right now. But so I'm sure that plenty of our listeners could talk already about CDA 230 for a couple of hours. I know that all of our panelists today could, but do you want to give a background, I guess, about the Communications Decency Act, Section 230, why it's called the most important law on the internet, and what you guys or how it's been playing into both of your works recently?
Sure, I'd be happy to. The CDA, the Communications Decency Act, is essentially two different amendments that were part of the 1996 Telecom Act. One was an amendment by Senator Exxon of Nebraska. He basically, in the days of 1994, 1995, and then into 1996, he had this big blue binder, and he'd walk around the Senate floor and bring senators into his office, and he'd say to the other senators, "Hey, have you seen this World Wide Web thing? Have you seen this internet thing?" And of course, every one of them shook their souls and said, "No, I have not seen that in the internet, because I have no idea what it is. We don't have it in our office. I don't know anything about it." And he said, "Well, let me show you." And he'd open up his blue binder, and it included essentially just printouts of naked people, essentially. They were just printouts from the World Wide Web, and he's like, "This is the World Wide Web. Naked people are all over the World Wide Web." And now, this is one of those things that are hard to imagine. There really wasn't ready access to pornography, before the 1990s. Like, you had to go into a magazine store, and they would be behind the counter, and they'd be behind a kind of brown paper bag. You really didn't have ready access to pornography, so it was kind of a shock to these senators that this internet thing just had naked people on it. And he basically said, "This is what it is." So after about a year,
and only that, right?
No, he didn't have any pitches. He didn't have any pitches of, like, here's the Yahoo list, or here's, like, the Social Security Administration. He didn't have any of those. He just had naked people. That was all it was there. And it was kind of a one-sided, educational moment for these senators. But by the end of his time doing this, if you would ask any one of those 100 senators, what is the internet to you? What is the World Wide Web? And they'd say, "You know what? It's a binder full of naked people, and we didn't have it. And I can't believe the government built this." So the Communications Decency Act, passes like without any problem whatsoever, because the senator's entire experience was that the internet was embodied in this blue binder, pictures of naked people. So, and then on the other side of the House, people kind of woke up to this. Like the ACLU and the Center for Democracy and Technology were starting to, and people for the American Way Foundation realized that the internet was the greatest potential platform for freedom of expression ever created, dwarfing the Gutenberg press. And they started fighting back against this, and they were trying to convince these congressmen and senators that this was a really bad idea, and that it wasn't a broadcast medium where the indecency standard came from. And they tried to convince them that they needed a path. Basically, at that time, there was a case that Prodigy was involved in, where there was a financial defamation post on one of the Prodigy forums, and essentially the case came down against Prodigy for failing to filter out that defamatory material from their site. And they said, it's a user posted it. We can't be responsible for it. And they said, well, you do actually try to get pornography off of Prodigy services. So if you can get other things and you can police other content, you certainly could do it for financial defamation. And that was alarming to a lot of people. So Senator Wyden, then Congressman Cox and Congressman Wyden, decided to create what we think of now as Section 230 CDA, which was limited liability for user-generated content sites when people post that they're not responsible for the material that they post, and that there was a good Samaritan clause that allowed them to proactively curate their communities different types of content without incurring liability for it. It was supposed to be inserted as an amendment to the Exxon bill, but they both went in together. And eventually, when ACLU and others brought suit, and was decided by the Supreme Court in ACLU versus Reno, that the Exxon Amendment portion of it was stripped out, but they left the Cox-Wyden Amendment, which was the limited liability Good Samaritan clause.
So, Ali, why are you still working on CDA 230 things 20 years later?
Good question. Well, so this law has been really important and influential. It's really helped this limit on liability has really helped so many different internet services grow and thrive. It's something, and it's like, to me, it's a great Congress success story of being so just like ahead of its time and knowing that this was going to be an important consideration. There's language in the beginning of 230 about how it's like to promote the continued development of the internet, and it was really a great law from Senator Cox and Senator Wyden and Representative Cox.
In the program notes, I think someone said, people like Ben Wittes and Professor Danielle Citron, who's at the University of Miami, Maryland Law School, have argued in a paper called "The Internet Won't Break" that Section 230 has gone way too far as a limited liability or clause for the internet, and it was never meant. Congress never meant it to be so expansive. The reality is that there are a lot of members you can talk to right now, including now Senator Wyden and former Congressman Chris Cox, that say that's exactly what they intended. So the Ben Wittes, Professor Citron article it says that not only it goes way too far, and Congress did not intend for it to go this far, that the courts have expanded it radically, and that's one of their arguments. And number two, they say there's a lot of bad people doing really bad stuff on the internet, from bullies to sex traffickers to gossip sites to people doing libelous things, revenge porn, and they just go through a long list of different things that they believe should not be allowed on the internet, and they say that intermediaries should be doing more to police it, and there should be either a pullback on the judicial jurisprudence around this, or Congress needs to kind of limit it. One of those issues happens to be sex trafficking on the internet, and which is the subject of the current bill, SESTA. What
does that stand for?
I just cannot remember. I just cannot remember the acronym, and the House bill is even more difficult. I can't even think of the acronym. But essentially, it would amend Section 230.
Stop Enabling Sex Traffickers Act.
Excellent. Essentially, it would and here's the thing. I mean, I don't really. There's terrible things that are happening on the internet, but Section 230 does not, get in the way of criminal prosecutions. And Ben Wittes and Professor Citron basically are saying that we should have a variety of exceptions to Section 230 because, frankly, rather than prosecuting individual bad actors, it's kind of easier to go after the middleman, which is the ISPs hosting the content, and that would kind of eradicate this problem from view. And that's kind of the argument. They also say that the internet has grown up and that it no longer needs the protection of Section 230. It was created by Congress in their argument when the internet was in its cradle. It was nascent and it needed protection. And now these companies like Google and Facebook and Reddit, they're huge multi-billion-dollar companies, and the internet no longer needs coddling.
And there's dozens of Internet Law and Policy Foundry fellows to defend it.
Yeah. There's a whole new cadre of lawyers that can stand up and defend the internet. And the reality, though, is that the internet, in my view, is as nascent as it ever was. I mean, yes, Google and Facebook are huge, and like, who cares? The reality is that it is a platform for new companies, startups to start up without actually hiring a team of lawyers before they do that. And I think that's a faulty part of their argument that the internet is all grown up. It really isn't. A platform is a platform. And you really want to see, I want to see startups compete with Google and compete with Facebook. That's awesome. That's what the internet's about.
That is an awesome answer. And I think that...
I'm going to jump in just to say that CCIA, for a kind of a 2-minute explainer version of this in-depth history that Tim has explained, we have a great video that we put together at CCIA. If you go to ccianet.org/section 230, we have a video that we put together that kind of goes through this history and has some other blog posts with more information, has some other resources like an infographic and a document about a lot of myths versus facts, and a lot of other resources if you would like to learn more or have some kind of links to share. But yeah, thank you, Tim, for that really great history and description of what's going on in the present and why Section 230 remains so important for the internet services of today and tomorrow.
Well, thank you guys both for joining us today. This has been the very first episode of Tech Policy Grind, so we had probably the best people in the world to tell the story of the Foundry, and I think to give us a little background on what's going on with CDA 230 today. Ali, is there anything going on the CCIA space in 230 world or your world that you'd like to call out for our listeners?
I would just put that plug about our 230 page, which we're continuing to update with new information as they hold more hearings. If you want to just stay up to date, ccianet.org/section 230. We try to keep that as a useful resource for folks that want to learn more about what's happening.
Awesome. Tim, I know that last month you were at the Carving Out Exceptions to Section 230. How will it affect the Internet panel with the Advisory Committee to the Congressional Internet Caucus? Is there any other events coming up or anything you'd like to shout out to our listeners?
Yeah, actually, next Friday, we have a congressional briefing in the Rayburn Building, which we will live stream, I believe, on Facebook. It's on hacking. What color is your hat? Looking at vulnerability disclosures and white hat hacking with an all-star panel. That's more and more. It's coming into law about in the autonomous vehicles legislation in the Senate includes provisions about how to disclose vulnerabilities in software and systems. So that's on Friday with an all-star panel. And then a week or two later, we'll have a panel in Rayburn, also going to be live streaming on Facebook, called Data Analytics and Artificial Intelligence Policy Implications. So we'll be looking at that issue as well. And of course, that'll be gearing up for January, which is our State of the Net conference, which will be on January 22nd here at the Museum in Washington. And we actually have, it's totally free for Foundry Fellows to attend, and we do have a student scholarship, so students can attend for free as well.
Yeah, and just to our students out there, anytime you see available, student discounts or student scholarships or fellowships or passes to get to conferences, that should be your signal to sign up immediately, because once you graduate, those are no longer available, and it becomes rather expensive to go to conferences. So take note.
Those are words to live by.
Yeah. All right. Well, Tim, Ali, again, I want to thank you both so much for joining us today. Coming up, as I said, and just to be clear, I'm not sure entirely when this episode is going to go out. So the days that Tim was just speaking about, that's Friday, October 13th, that you're going to be having the What Color Hat Are You panel. Sounds really exciting. I'm definitely going to be checking out the live stream. But as we close out the show, each episode of the show, we like to highlight some of the upcoming events and recently published work of Foundry members, exciting stuff coming up, as well as some Foundry job board highlights. So next week, I'm not sure again when this episode is going to become available, but on October 11th and 12th in Long Beach, California, we'll be having the ABA IP panel, the IP West conference. And there will be a group of Foundry members, including myself, as well as Gabriella Ziccarelli, a whole bunch of really awesome folks talking about navigating disruptive technologies and the law. So if you're interested in hearing us talk about artificial intelligence and machine learning and how it relates to copyright, or health tech and privacy, or virtual reality and augmented reality, all sorts of really exciting frontier tech, that's going to be a lot of fun, and we would love to see you there. Tickets are still open, and it's going to be at the Hilton Hotel in Long Beach. Also, starting this week on October 11th, Gabriella Ziccarelli and Camille Stewart, two other Foundry fellow members, are starting their own podcast called Hustle Over Entitlement. It's a podcast telling the stories of trailblazers and risk takers, and it launches October 10th. You can find out more at www.hustleoverentitlement.com, subscribe on iTunes or Google Play, and listen to the intro episode right now. And I know for a fact that Denise Howell, my co-host over on This Week in Law, another awesome person who's sort of paved the way into her own niche, is one of the subjects of the first few episodes. So I give it my stamp of approval, and I hope that you guys will go and check it out.
I'm super excited. I need more and more podcasts to listen to. This is Joe. I'm going to put a self-plug for myself because this was an event I was actually willing to pay for until I got asked to participate. But if you're in Washington, D.C. on October 16th or 17th, Digital Eye at Blind Wino is going to be this event from the Goethe Institute. It's pitching itself as this interactive event that merges theater, film, and a live game show to explore how our digital age is affecting our everyday lives. If you don't want to hear from me, there will also be privacy experts from Access Now, Epic, and the Georgetown Center for Privacy and Technology.
Awesome. All right, and now... That sounds very, very cool. All right, so for the Foundry job board today, I feel like we sort of need... Eventually, we might get some bed music to play underneath this bit, but... I'm working on it. The Foundry job board today has 5 very awesome jobs we're going to highlight today. Assistant General Counsel, Global Privacy and Security at Nike, responsible for managing and supporting global legal privacy and security strategies for Nike Incorporated and its affiliates. The Obama Foundation Fellows are looking for a diverse set of community-minded rising stars. This be organizers, inventors, artists, entrepreneurs, journalists, and more, who are altering the civic engagement landscape. You can apply to be Privacy and Data Protection Counsel at 23andMe. So if you're in Mountain View, a fantastic opportunity to help shape privacy, data protection, and information security policies and programs at one of the maybe more controversial and exciting consumer genomics testing companies.
And let me just say, you'd be able to work with Kate Black, who's a former CDTer. She's really awesome, and it's a really cool company that is facing a whole host of incredibly... tough legal questions.
Absolutely, yeah. Commercial counsel at General Assembly. And if you're on the East Coast in New York, you ought to check out the General Assembly. They're hiring for general counsel, where you'll be the lead attorney for their rapidly growing enterprise business, handling a wide range of commercial privacy and intellectual property issues. And finally, video game giant Electronic Arts are hiring as well. EA is looking for experienced practical attorneys in their advertising and in their privacy programs in the U.S., reporting to the Associate General Counsel and Chief Privacy Officer. So those are all some very exciting jobs. Another reason to keep your eyes glued to the Internet Law and Policy Foundry website. You can find that at www.ilpfoundry.us, and we encourage you to check that out. Our blog is going to be updated regularly as well, and you'll be able to find past issues of this podcast there as well. Next episode, we're going to be joined by Tiffany Lee on an episode we're entitling right now, AI and Algorithms and Justice. I think that you guys might find that interesting if you are interested in any of the things that we tend to talk about today. Joe, Pinal, I want to thank you both for joining us on the very first inaugural episode. To our listeners, the format of this show is a little loosey-goosey. We might be changing it up as the future unfolds, and eventually there will probably be a different set of co-hosts, so we might cycle through co-hosts as the show goes on. So I really appreciate you guys being patient with us, and I hope that you enjoyed the show.
I guess if you're out there listening to this, please let us know how we did and give us some feedback.
Yeah, we all really appreciate feedback. You can reach us at Twitter. I'm at Emery Roan. Joe?
I'm at Joe Jerome.
Pinal?
I'm at Woman of Fuego. That's Spanish for fire.
All right, and you can always ping the Internet Law and Policy Foundry as well by going to the ilpfoundry.us/connect. So if you like the show, I really hope that you give us a rate and review on iTunes. Hopefully it's a 5-star rating, and if you don't like it, maybe still review it, but give us an email and let us know how we could do this better. Reach out to us at social media or at the Foundry, and we're super excited to see where this show goes, and we're glad that you're going to be around for this show. So thank you so much for joining us. We'll talk to you next time. Bye.